This is a Forex Preview here at xm.com. I'm Rafi Boyajan, and joining me today is investment analyst Christina Barthenidou. We'll be having a look at the Fed policy meeting that's coming up on Wednesday. So, Christina, I think it's safe to say that it's a pretty much foregone conclusion that the Fed will announce the start of bond tapering on Wednesday. And given that the next dot plot will not come before December, what should traders be watching this week?
Hi, Rafi. Indeed, it seems that the time for bond tapering has finally come for the Fed. Actually, the minutes from the September meeting provided some extra details about the plan, signaling a 10 billion monthly reduction in government bonds and a 5 billion cut in mortgage-backed securities, with the program expected to end around July 2022. However, it's worthy to mention that this plan is based on assumptions that economic recovery will remain on track. But disappointingly, GDP growth figures showed the weakest expansion since the recovery started in spring in the 3 months to September. Though markets didn't really show any significant reaction to the data, since the slowdown came mostly from the car industry, which is highly exposed to chip shortages. So that could be a temporary drawback. Also, the data revealed that consumption spending remains quite strong, and more importantly, compensations in the private sector are still above their pre-pandemic trend and above the inflation rate, which suggests that the economy is still moving at a healthy pace despite the supply limits and the high inflation. Now, as you have mentioned, the bond tapering scenario is already largely priced in. So what remains to be seen is how the path of interest rates will develop. Of course, no new rate projections are expected for this meeting, but traders will still pay close attention to any inflation comments to see whether the spikes in consumer prices have become concerning enough to motivate the Fed raise its interest rates earlier than previously anticipated. The Fed and many other central banks continue to hold an anti-inflation stance, arguing that the upside inflation pressures are a temporary phenomenon, but investors are not so patient as central banks are. Currently, the core PC price index is actually mismatching the transitory narrative, rising to a fresh 30-year high recently. And what is certain is that since the battle against the pandemic is not over yet, supply chain constraints and labor shortages will keep boosting prices in the coming months, especially if wage costs move higher. So reasonably, investors have already raised their own rate expectations to 2 rate hikes next year, one in mid of 2022, probably around July, and then the next one at the end of the year. And what they are currently waiting for is just a recognition from the Fed.
Now, turning to the dollar, what is your outlook for the currency? Could the Fed bring some upside for the greenback, even though the chances of any surprises are low?
Well, I wouldn't rule out some cautious talking about inflation. Like in the case of the ECB, the Fed could highlight that inflation is closely watched as inflation pressures last longer than previously anticipated. But overall, the transitory narrative will probably remain in place, signaling that the Fed may not rush to raise interest rates next year, but hold a wait-and-see mode. But if Powell doesn't play down the aggressive rate hike pricing in markets, then that could bode well for the US dollar, with dollar yen likely challenging the key resistance of 114.54 in the aftermath. On the other hand, if the Fed announces the start of bond tapering but disapproves any rate hike scenarios for next year, then dollar yen may head for the 113 level. We shouldn't forget that non-farm payrolls are also on the agenda on Friday. So if those show that the U.S. economy is still far away from full employment conditions, then that could be another headwind for the dollar.
Indeed, the NFP will also be important on Friday. Christina, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for watching this Forex Preview on the November FOMC meeting here at xm.com.